Picture this. You're in the middle of an argument. Your pulse is racing. Every word feels like a weapon. Every reply is loaded with meaning. You're not just trying to speak. You're trying to win. But so is the other person. You're both talking. Neither of you is really listening. You're just waiting for your next opening to strike. And then, imagine someone leans in and quietly whispers something chilling. You've already lost. What? You're defending yourself. You're standing your ground. You're fighting to be right. How can that be losing? Because, as Friedrich Nietzsche would say, the moment you start reacting emotionally in a battle of words, you've already surrendered the most important thing: control. According to Nietzsche, real power doesn't come from arguing better. It comes from refusing to play the game in the first place. Let that sink in. Why we argue, and why it's rarely about the truth. Most of us think we argue to find truth. We don't. We argue to protect our ego. Think about it. When was the last time someone proved you wrong, and you felt good about it? Nietzsche believed arguments are rarely about logic. They're about identity. People argue because their ego is threatened. Being wrong feels like a personal attack. They want dominance. Who talks louder, longer, or wins the crowd? They want validation. Not truth, just the appearance of being right. It's not about who has the best points. It's about who controls the frame. And the louder you argue, the more you lose that control. Nietzsche's view: power is not in words, but in control. Nietzsche's philosophy flips everything we believe about arguments. He saw those who react emotionally as weak, not strong. The true power lies in the restraint to stay calm and measured. His concept of the will to power isn't about brute strength or domination. It's about shaping reality on your terms. And often, that means staying quiet when everyone else is shouting. The Übermensch doesn't argue. He chooses. Nietzsche's ideal individual, the Übermensch, doesn't argue to win or prove a point. He picks his battles. He speaks only when it serves his purpose. He isn't pulled into petty fights. He leads the room by not reacting. Imagine a meeting. Two people are arguing. One is loud, aggressive, trying to dominate. The other is calm, composed, listening. When the quiet one finally speaks, it's measured, impactful. It changes the tone of the entire conversation. Who had the power? The one who controlled himself, not the one who raised his voice. The psychology of strategic silence. Here's the secret. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Used right, it makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to reveal their insecurities. It creates tension, and tension gives you the upper hand. The Übermensch uses silence as a tool. A pause, a moment of restraint. A perfectly timed comment that shifts the whole conversation. Silence isn't absence. It's a calculated move. Socrates, winning without ever raising his voice. Let's go back to ancient Athens. Socrates didn't argue. He asked questions. He didn't tell people they were wrong. He let them realize it themselves. That's the Socratic method, leading people to their own contradictions. Say a politician claimed to be wise. Socrates would just ask, "What is wisdom?" And every answer would unravel until the man stood there, confused, unsure of everything he thought he knew. That's not debate. That's silent power. He never needed to raise his voice. He just waited, calm, composed, and watched his opponents collapse under their own logic. Steve Jobs. Conflict, but on his terms. Now fast forward to modern business. Steve Jobs wasn't silent, but he was strategic. He didn't argue just to prove a point. He argued to persuade, to lead, to build something that didn't exist yet. When Apple engineers wanted physical buttons on the iPhone, Jobs didn't just yell, "No." He listened. Let them speak. Then slowly, deliberately, he made them see what he saw. He didn't force. He led. His genius wasn't in how he spoke, but in how he made others believe. And that only happens when you don't waste energy on ego-driven battles. Let's step onto the battlefield, but not one of words or arguments, the kind where your mind is the weapon and silence is your shield. This is where Miyamoto Musashi enters. Musashi, the duel you lose before it begins. Musashi wasn't just Japan's most legendary samurai. He was a master of psychological warfare. He fought over 60 duels. He never lost. But his secret wasn't just swordsmanship. It was control. One of his most famous battles was against Sasaki Kojiro, a swordsman famous for his deadly speed. Everyone expected an epic clash, but Musashi showed up late, on purpose. Kojiro was furious, pacing, angry, off balance. By the time the fight began, Kojiro was so blinded by emotion that he couldn't think clearly. That's when Musashi struck and won easily. The lesson? Control their emotions, and you control the outcome. The thread that binds. Power through restraint. What do Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Musashi have in common? They weren't reactive. They were deliberate. They didn't waste energy arguing for the sake of being right. They dictated the terms of the interaction. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He believed that true power is never found in the loudest voice. It's found in the one who knows when to speak and why. The next time someone tries to drag you into a fight, ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally or controlling the moment? Because the second you lose your composure, you lose the battle. Why do we really argue? It's not what you think. You might believe you argue for truth, for justice, for what's right. But psychology says otherwise. Here's the truth. Most arguments aren't about facts. They're about power and ego. Let's break it down. 1. Cognitive biases. Your brain isn't built to argue fairly. Our brains are wired to win, not to learn. We all carry invisible glitches, biases, that twist how we argue. Confirmation. Bias. We search only for information that supports what we already believe. Backfire effect. When someone challenges us, we don't change. We double down. Dunning-Kruger effect. The less we know, the more confident we feel. These biases turn arguments into echo chambers. No one actually listens. They just wait for their turn to speak. The Übermensch sees this trap and steps around it. He listens, he watches, and he decides, is this worth my energy? 2. Emotional triggers. Why you take it so personally. Some arguments don't just annoy you, they ignite you. Why? Because they touch something deeper, your identity. When someone challenges your beliefs, it can feel like they're attacking you. That's why debates about politics or religion get heated fast. People feel like their existence is on trial. Nietzsche understood this, and he taught. If someone can make you react emotionally, They own you. The Übermensch never gives away that kind of power. He doesn't react. He chooses when, how, and if he'll respond at all. 3. The hidden driver. Validation. Why do people love arguing on social media? Not for truth, not even to persuade, but to be seen as right. They want likes, applause, retweets, ego candy. Nietzsche knew this. Most people argue not to discover truth, but to gain approval from the herd. But the Übermensch doesn't need applause. He creates his own truth and walks his own path. Ask yourself, if no one was watching, would you still argue? If the answer is no, maybe you never needed to speak in the first place. Modern science agrees with Nietzsche. You might think Nietzsche was just a 19th century philosopher with old ideas, but behavioral psychology today backs him up. Let's take a look. 1. Power in social settings. Silence is authority. Studies show that the most powerful people in a room aren't the ones who speak the most. They're the ones who control the flow. They speak slowly, clearly, rarely. And when they do, everyone listens. Why? Because they've created an aura of authority. They don't interrupt. They don't overshare. They don't scramble for attention. That calm silence, it speaks volumes. 2. Calmness equals confidence. Want to be persuasive in an argument? Don't raise your voice. Lower it. Don't talk faster. Slow down. People are wired to interpret calm as confidence, and confidence is magnetic. This is why Nietzsche's Übermensch is so powerful. He doesn't just win arguments. He makes them irrelevant. He doesn't dominate the noise. He rises above it, the silence that shapes reality. So now we reach a deeper question. If silence is so powerful, should we never speak? Should we just nod quietly and avoid all conflict? That's not power. That's fear in disguise. And Nietzsche never stood for passivity. He wasn't saying never argue. He was saying, don't argue unless it transforms something. Use words like a sculptor uses a chisel, with intention, with control, with purpose. When you argue out of ego, you lose. But when you argue to shape reality, you become a force. Let's address the elephant in the room. If silence is power, does that mean we should never speak up? Never fight? Never challenge? Absolutely not. Because Nietzsche wasn't preaching silence for silence's sake. He was teaching mastery. And mastery means knowing when to step back and when to step in. The will to power, not passivity, but precision. Nietzsche's will to power is one of the most misunderstood ideas in philosophy. It doesn't mean brute force. It doesn't mean bullying your way to the top. It means self-overcoming. It means taking conflict, struggle, even suffering, and turning them into fuel for transformation. Avoiding conflict altogether? That's not power. That's fear wrapped in restraint. True power is choosing the right battles and entering them with full intent. Why most people fear conflict and why you shouldn't. Conflict is uncomfortable. It's messy. It exposes you. But that's also why it's necessary. Nietzsche saw struggle not as something to be avoided, but as a crucible. You don't sharpen a blade by polishing it with silk. You test it against steel. Likewise, your ideas, your character, only gain strength when challenged. Think of the boldest minds in history. Galileo risked his life to challenge the church. Socrates was executed for questioning authority. Nietzsche himself died misunderstood and dismissed by most of his time. Yet their ideas shaped the modern world. Not because they avoided conflict, but because they engaged with purpose. The difference between arguing and shaping. Most people argue to win, but the Übermensch argues to build, to shape the future, not to stroke his ego. He doesn't argue over petty things, but he doesn't run from high-stakes conflict either. He knows when a battle can sharpen the mind or dull it. So how do you know when to engage? When to enter the arena? Engage when? The argument sharpens your thinking. It reveals deeper truths about yourself or others. It pushes growth or evolution. It shifts the balance of power in your favor. But walk away when? The argument only feeds your ego. The other person isn't truly listening. It's a loud emotional storm with no clear outcome. Your silence would say more than any reply. Nietzsche wasn't saying to be quiet. He was saying, don't speak unless it matters. Power isn't in the noise. It's in the pause before the words. Think of your words as currency. Every time you speak, you spend. So ask yourself, are these words buying me power, clarity, or growth, or just paying off my insecurity? Imagine this. You're told you only have 100 words left in your entire life. Would you use them in a petty argument? Would you waste them defending yourself to someone who will never change? Or would you choose every word like a blade, sharp, clean, precise? That's Nietzsche's challenge. The next time you're about to argue, stop, just pause. Don't speak. Watch how the other person reveals themselves, their fears, their need to be seen, their emotional blind spots, all without you saying a single word. And when you do choose to speak, let your words land like thunder after stillness. That's the silent trick that gives you real power. Because true power isn't loud, it isn't reactive, and it sure as hell isn't desperate to be right. It's deliberate, it's quiet, it's composed. And when it finally speaks, the world listens. So what now? If you want to master this art of thinking deeper, living wiser, and owning your influence, don't just react. Observe. Choose. Then speak. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and join us as we explore more ideas that sharpen the mind and transform the soul. Until then, stay quiet, stay sharp, stay powerful.